All right, so I am on my iPad. It's this set here. It's got a lot of emojis. The Juicy Watercolor set, and I'm gonna start with a sketch. So for the sketch, I have the simple watermelon tutorial color palette. You can create your own palette, but if you want, I will include a link to this. It'll be free, and you can follow along and actually use the brush if you would like. Again, I'll leave a link in the description. It's a $2 brush set because it's such a small set of brushes. So yeah, anyway, so I already kind of messed up here, but you can see I'm just sketching the wedge, which is going to be sort of a tent shape, and on the bottom here you'll have the kind of a curved bottom. All right, here we go. And then, yeah, so that's it right there. And again, this is what I warned you about. I rotate my iPad quite a bit. I rotate the screen as well, but for comfort reasons and drawing long lines, I tend to rotate the iPad itself, but I will try to be considerate of drawing. And if this is a fun way to draw, I would be more than happy to do it again one day. Become sort of a routine where I can explain. So I have my brush, and then let me see what I'm doing so for eraser, I'm using this Zesty Citrus, and that'll work. It's a good eraser, just to kind of refine the line that I'm creating here. And again, I try to be very minimalist, so I don't have like a standalone eraser brush. I'm just trying to get the image I'm looking for. So here's a good wedge. I'm just gonna refine it a little bit just to figure out where I'm gonna mark everything. All right, and I personally prefer to also leave the sketch in the final drawing, just because that's what it looks like when I'm drawing for real. So now I'm creating a new layer. So here's my sketch layer. I'm not gonna name the layer just to save time. And then I have this Tender Peach brush here, and you can see how I use that. So the first color here I'm going to use to color this surface. And it's gonna be pretty rough, and you'll see I'm not gonna be lifting my Apple Pencil off the surface. I'm just gonna try to cover the whole thing without lifting my brush. Now I do have another set of brushes that are for free. It's not necessarily the same thing. It's also for watercolor, but it's also ink, and it's meant to emulate what I do for, it's meant to emulate my process when I draw traditional media. So here I lifted my pen, that's fine. I'm just gonna keep going, cover that up. All right, I think I might do a second layer just because I have the ability to. And it's, you can see a lot of overlapping, and that's really just a nice painterly feel. And this brush is interesting because as you press harder, it gets kind of into a lighter color, which is what watercolor does. And you guys, I don't use a traditional brush either. The way that I draw, it's I use an aquash watercolor pen, and that's all I use. And so if you're coming from a traditional watercolor background, you might be thinking, man, this guy's doing some weird stuff. So I'm gonna create a new layer now. I got that first surface done, and the size I'm at is about 39. 33 is also really like my favorite size for this brush because it gets to the right fineness for me. So this is a darker pink. I'm also going to be doing that, and really what I'm doing is creating this solid shape that I will later on create a clipping mask. And clipping masks are really essential for me to get the look I'm going for, because of, you know, when you're drawing with real watercolors, you know what's the wet surface and what's the dry surface, and you can manipulate the colors by adding, you know, some pigment to wet, knowing that it'll spread a certain way. And I feel like the closest I've been able to get, and really it's pretty good, is by using the clipping mask function and treating, but the cool thing is with that clipping mask function, you don't have to, you know, like with real watercolor, you would have to wet the surface again. With the clipping mask, you can just, you know, turn it off, turn it on, go back in. It's a lot of flexibility, so it's really fun. So there you go. I filled that up. Not very pretty yet, but let's keep going. There we go. And this is going to be the rind. And I'm gonna do another layer. And these are very bright colors. I really like using undiluted bright colors. That's one of the benefits of drawing with in a digital format, is you get to use some colors that are really hard to achieve or maintain in a traditional media. All right, now that we have this shape, what we're gonna do is create new layers above each of these layers. So the first layer here, this surface is gonna have a new layer, this one is gonna have a new layer, and then you tap on the layer above. So I'm gonna tap on the layer above number 2, layer number 5 is gonna be a clipping mask. So you select clipping mask, you see that little arrow? So with that arrow, that means you're going to be only coloring or marking within the shape beneath it. Now, let me show you what I mean. So with this, I'm gonna choose, this is a brush called Zesty Citrus. It was what I was using for my eraser. It's also really handy, and it emulates the spreading of watercolor. All right, so first I'm actually gonna use this white color. There you go. And it really, it's got a nice watercolor texture to it, but it also spreads very much like what you would see if you were on wet watercolor paper. All right, creating another clipping mask. I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. That's a really satisfying brush to use. I enjoy that. All right, so now I'm gonna go to this sort of a mint color. Yeah, very simple. Oh, and then do the same on this masking layer. You can go back and forth. All right, so there we go. And then for the rind, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna create a clipping mask. Oop, I selected invert. I'm not sure what that did. And I'm gonna do some purple. And with this purple, I'm just sort of gonna shade and create texture on the bottom. There you go, I like that. And then now what I'm gonna do is, in addition, I'm not gonna create a new layer for this. In addition, I'm gonna just start creating some nuances within the watercolor. All right, so there you go. Just because, you know, watercolor is, it goes back and forth, and sometimes you get some mixings, and you don't want it to look too mechanical when you're trying to achieve this look. All right, there you go. I'm gonna also do that on this masking layer. Oops, a little too far there. Oops. All right, I like that. So now I'm gonna add the seeds. But first, let me sort of add a bit more shade to this side, doing this dark green. There you go. You can see the dimension in that a little better. And this is how I'm using these brushes. I haven't used all of them yet, but this is what I used in order to create the image in question. All right, and then very simply, I'm just gonna do some seeds here. There's these teardrop shapes. All right, and that's it right here.